All right, I think we're good to go. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Boynton, and I am a Senior Project Manager with the U.S. Department of the Interior's International Technical Assistance Program, or ITAP. I am our program lead for the Ambassador's Water Experts Program. I actually share our portfolio with a colleague of mine who covers the Asia Pacific region, Claire Shields. But for all things Africa purposes, you will be working with me. So it's a pleasure to get to speak to you today about the Ambassador's Water Experts Program and what we're able to offer. To kick things off, I wanted to provide just a little bit of intro on ITAP first, just because I know it might be the first time some of you are working with us in any capacity. So what is DOI-ITAP? So the U.S. Department of the Interior's International Technical Assistance Program is part of the Office of the Secretary. So we sort of sit at the umbrella level of the department. And our sort of job, our mission is to share the expertise of our 70,000 plus employees, technical specialists, cultural specialists, economists, et cetera, with partners around the world in support of sustainable natural and cultural resource management. So as you can see in the graphic on the right-hand side, we have all of these offices and bureaus sort of spread out. You might be familiar with some of them: the National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Geological Survey. And DOI-ITAP's kind of model is to take expertise from those bureaus, often mix it together to create interdisciplinary teams. And then with funding from State Department and USAID to create projects and provide technical assistance on a short, medium, and long-term basis. And we've been doing this since 1995 in over 70 countries around the world. We cover a large range of different topics. So as you can see on the slide here, there are many different sort of areas of expertise within the department, everything from hazards and energy to water and minerals. Water is obviously a core focus of what we're here to talk about today, but if you have an interest in any of the other areas, I'd be happy to talk about them further. We have a large East Africa portfolio right now that largely covers conservation, wildlife management, some marine plastics, as well as some sustainable tourism, as well as Indigenous engagement. And in terms of where we work, it's pretty impressive when you look at it on a map. So on this graphic, you can see the colors that are the countries that are dark blue are where we have active projects, and the ones in light blue are where we've previously worked, but might not have an active program. And I believe this graphic is at least a couple months out of date, so we'll probably be sharing around an updated version or putting one up on the website soon. And as far as how we're organized, we have 4 regional teams. So if you're looking for a specific person to reach out to about a particular part of the world, we have team leads: Cynthia Pereira for the Latin America and the Caribbean team, Ethan Taylor for the Africa and Europe team, who has joined us today by surprise, Colleen Castle for the Middle East and Northern Africa team, as well as Jason Riley for the Asia Pacific Islands and Arctic team. And if you're interested in learning more, we would encourage you to go check out our website, which is www.doi.gov/ITAP. We put a lot of our recent project highlights up there. We also have a Facebook page, which I linked to on the contact slide at the end of this presentation. It's a great way to just keep up with sort of everything that we have going on, because as you can imagine, with all of these different countries filled in different colors, there's a lot to keep track of. All right, now on to sort of the main focus of today's presentation, the Ambassador's Water Experts Program. So first of all, what is AWEP, as we call it, because it's a mouthful? It originated as a partnership between the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Department of the Interior to provide short-term technical assistance on all things water back in 2018. It was designed originally as an in-person program where DOI would recruit experts for particular water topics, and we would arrange their travel to go overseas for 1 to 2 weeks to deliver technical assistance. The kind of goal was to provide additional support to countries that were identified as priorities under the Water for the World Act and the U.S. Global Water Strategy. It was also designed to be request-based, so that kind of foreign counterparts would reach out to the embassies and the consulates and would say, we need help on this particular water issue. And this would be a tool for embassies to use in providing that technical assistance. We've sort of expanded a little bit beyond that now, which I'll go more into detail about in a few minutes. But it's no longer just a in-person program. Because of the pandemic, we were forced to shift kind of modalities a little bit. We were forced to shift the way that we thought about water technical assistance to a more virtual focus. And so we now offer in-person programs the same as we always have. We also offer virtual programs where we do consultations, we deliver workshops, webinars, presentations online, and hybrid, where we do kind of a virtual consultation and series of discussions first, and then an in-person program sort of further down the line. AWEP is currently working in quite a few countries. I think the last count was approximately 20 completed programs, and we're working in about 20 more. So we've obviously expanded beyond the priority countries from the global water strategy to kind of more broadly address water security issues around the world, with a focus on lower and middle income countries where the technical assistance is kind of most beneficial. You can see on the map that we've done some programs in West Africa. Specifically, we had a program in Liberia back in 2018, 2019, but it's hasn't been sort of a focus in kind of recent years, and we would love to change that. We would love to see more work in Western Africa, especially given the severe water challenges and the likelihood of continuing water challenges in the region. In terms of what the Ambassadors Water Experts program is able to cover, we include a broad variety of water topics, and it can really be anything that touches water. So you see here a whole list of different technical areas that sort of fall broadly within water resource management. But we also look at sustainable agriculture as it relates to water. We also look at public health as it relates to water. We also look at climate change as it relates to water. None of these things sort of are standalone issues. They're obviously all intersectional and can kind of play out in a variety of different arenas of public policy and of life for communities. And so we recognize that within the Ambassadors Water Experts program, and we aim to provide kind of holistic support with a water focus. And so any of these areas, we can provide technical assistance, and I'll go through the specific how in a minute. So examples of like, what is technical assistance? What do you mean you provide technical assistance? We can do it in a variety of ways, and we have done. One option is a workshop where we provide trainers that lead those workshops, who design the kind of itinerary and the agenda for the workshop and deliver it. We do case studies where, you know, perhaps a country wants to have an expert review a particular situation in a particular country and assess whether it has merit or value in being extended to other places. We do consults where, you know, perhaps a country is considering an investment in a particular type of water infrastructure, or is looking at rolling out a new water policy. We can provide advisors who will sit down with those decision makers and walk them through kind of what they're looking at, what they might be seeing in terms of gaps, or perhaps things that they're missing in their current strategy. We do evaluations, so we can send teams in country to do assessments, whether water quality assessments is a good example of this, where you have teams of people who will go out to the field, who will do water quality analysis, who will take measurements and sort of do the science, and then provide a report back to the embassy and the foreign counterpart for decision makers to use in identifying an intervention, or looking at next steps, or figuring out how to better engage with priority communities. We also have folks who do policy review, who are less on the science side and more on the regulatory side. So we provide analysts who can look at existing legislation and say, you know, here's what you're missing in terms of enforcement capability, or here's where we in the US have been able to beef up our legislation by incorporating certain things, or draft legislation if they're earlier in the process. For example, we had a traveler recently return from El Salvador, where they had helped the government develop a national drinking water and sanitation law. So currently in El Salvador, they don't have regulation related to the sharing and management of water for drinking water and sanitation for drinking water use. And that's something that obviously they feel like they need. And so we brought an expert out who sat down with different community groups, different government agencies and water authorities to talk through the draft legislation and what kind of their areas of interest were, to make sure that everything was covered. and provided feedback and some red lines on some of the draft versions. And a kind of final report will be delivered here before the end of the year. And lastly, another option is just engagement. So we understand that water is obviously very important for a variety of reasons. It's, again, important for agriculture, it's important for health, it's important it's important for agriculture, it's important for health, it's important for communities who have traditions about fishing and other things. So AWIP can provide community managers to help develop and support outreach programs where there are particular needs in countries. This is obviously very big in Latin America with indigenous communities where they might have rituals and other traditions related to water use that need to be incorporated in national and regional legislation. And this is just a short list of different ways that different ambassadors, water experts programs have been executed in the past. In terms of cost coverage, because a big question we get from the embassies is, what does AWIP cover? In terms of what we can cover, flights, hotels, in-country costs for the US experts, that's sort of the baseline. We will arrange their travel. We will ensure that they have all of their needs on the ground met. We do not expect the embassy to pay for any of that. Honorarium for non-US government experts. We are able to pull in experts from outside of the US government. We have done in the past several times. They are eligible for a $250 per day honorarium. And so we provide that to the experts as well. Translation interpretation costs. If you're based in a country where English is not the language of business, or you expect you'll get a better reception or better turnout with interpretation or translation services provided, we will cover those costs, usually through a fund site that we can arrange with the embassy or consulate so that you can procure local services from the individuals who you traditionally work with, but we can cover those costs on our side, so you will not be expected to pay for any of them. Single use and workshop supplies. So you'll see at the end here that sort of differs from durable equipment, but single use things, like if you have a water quality testing kit and you want each of the participants to have a little kit with little test tubes that they can go out and use and then submit to the lab for testing, we can pay for that. We can pay for whiteboards and markers. We can pay for printing costs for handouts and other materials. Anything that's sort of single use or focused on workshop, we can cover those costs either on our side directly, or we can pay for it via a fund site, whatever is easiest for the embassy. And then video conferencing platform with interpretation features. You may have heard Kara mention before that we have access to ZoomGov. So that has a baked-in interpretation feature within it where we can create separate channels for different languages. This has been really useful in some cases where we've actually done simultaneous interpretation to multiple languages at once. So for example, in Uzbekistan, obviously the primary language of the government is Uzbek, but they also have a very large Russian-speaking population. So for the kind of series of webinars we did with them earlier this year, we had offerings in both Russian and Uzbek for the preference of the audience. And then lastly, things that we can't cover. Salaries. So unfortunately, our experts work on a sort of volunteer basis. We often refer to the program as a quasi-hydrologists without borders program. So we can't pay for salaries. We can't pay for durable equipment. So we're not buying lab equipment. We're not buying computers or modeling systems. Nothing. Unfortunately, we just don't have the budget or the kind of appropriations support to make purchases of that scale. Similarly, software licenses. Sometimes we've made exceptions for sort of single use or like 1 hour kind of trial versions of software, but we do not pay for, year subscription to a modeling software tool or, large software data management packages. And then travel costs for non-experts. Something that's come up quite a bit has been in the past, hosts have asked if we could cover travel costs for example, government participants from the foreign counterpart. And unfortunately, in most cases, we are not able to cover those costs. We are sort of restricted to the same rules and regulations that apply to the embassies in how they cover expenses for foreign counterparts. And as I'm sure you're aware, it's very difficult and very complicated to pay for foreign government expenses. So those are sort of the limitations, and we wouldn't necessarily expect Post to cover those either. So I put kind of an X on the Post side as well. Obviously, if you have the flexibility to do so and you would want to, that's something that we'd be happy to discuss, but it's not something that we tend to bake into our programs because we know that we can't cover it. That doesn't mean you're off the hook, though. In terms of non-financial responsibilities on the embassy, or on the consulates, there are quite a few. We consider the embassy and the consulate to serve as the primary liaison between the US-based expert team and the foreign counterpart. So that means that posts and consulates are expected to take the lead on all in-country components and coordination. That can often mean the event management and logistics of activities happening on the ground while the experts are in country. Again, we do pay for it, so we will provide a fund site, so there's no cost on the embassy other than the time and kind of responsibility placed on the ESTH or econ officers. And obviously, posts will also have final sign-off on all reports and deliverables. This is really for your benefit. If you don't want to have that type of power, we won't force it on you, but we want to make sure that whatever final product, whatever final deliverable comes out of an AWEP is something that the embassy is supportive of, is something that you would be happy to share back with your foreign counterparts. And so we often look to our colleagues at Post to help us review those documents and make sure that they are mindful of potential political sensitivities. You know, we've done work in countries like Syria where the political tensions and conflict situation play quite a large role in how water is administrated and how water administration takes place. And you can see sort of on the right-hand side a to-do list of kind of some general activities or expectations we would have on the embassies. In terms of an implementation timeline, so we aim for our AWEP programs to take place in 3 months or less. 3 months is sort of our ideal timeline. That's what we sort of envision when we meet with an embassy for the first time. And we can break it down into a couple different parts. The first week is sort of what we consider the application. The embassy or the consulate will submit an application for an AWEP, and that sort of sets off sets the clock. Weeks 2 and 3 are really dedicated to the US AWEP team's review. So we will take a look at the application. We'll see if we have any questions. We'll reach back out to the embassy or consulate if we need more. And ultimately, hopefully, we'll approve the application. We accept them on a rolling basis. So it's never really an issue of timing so much as just making sure that it's something that the AWEP program is well positioned to support in terms of providing the correct type of expertise, as well as that it's appropriately scoped, you know, narrowly defined so that it's actually achievable within the time frame of 1 to 2 weeks on the ground. Weeks 4 through 6 are sort of what we consider the recruitment time, where we will, at the point that we have an application, we will develop a recruitment notice that sort of takes into account all the different types of expertise that the embassy or consulate is looking for, and the time frame and sort of all of the background information that an individual would need to know if they're a good fit for the program. We will identify usually 1 to 2 experts. Virtual teams can get a little bit larger, but for the on-the-ground programs, we usually limit it to 2. And we'll share kind of the final group of CVs with the embassy or consulate for approval before making a final selection. Week 7 through 10 are the post-recruitment development time. So once we've identified an expert, once the embassy is on board with that expert or experts, we will arrange what we call sort of a day 0 meeting where we have the experts meet with the embassy and sort of receive any additional background information, perhaps request some additional resources, and sort of get a lay of the land for that particular program. Because some experts come in with a lot of international experience and very tailored expertise. Others might have international experience in a different region and be looking for info on this particular context. And so that serves as sort of that opportunity to get that. And then Beyond that, there's sort of the program development time frame where you have kind of an idea, you have some initial scoping that you've done of what you want in terms of technical assistance. Maybe you want a workshop on water quality, or you want you want them to review these 3 draft pieces of legislation. But there might be additional details that the experts would be aware of or would want to make sure that they have a full understanding of before they get started. And so these meetings and sort of discussions would happen during these couple of weeks. This is also a great time for the experts to meet with foreign counterparts. If you have foreign counterparts that are receptive and willing to meet with the experts directly, this is a great time to sort of get them in a room so that they can provide their own context and their own kind of analysis of the water situation in their country and their own priorities. And then lastly, weeks 11 and 12 are focused on delivery. So this could be virtual or in person, but ultimately the experts deliver technical assistance in whatever sort of format we deemed appropriate. And then follow-up reports after that can take an additional few weeks once folks return. But that's sort of the 3-month timeline, start to finish. Obviously, it's quite ambitious. It can get slowed down by a variety of things. The biggest hurdle we often face is travel documentation. Unfortunately, we have no control over how long it takes to get an official passport. So for our US government colleagues who are perhaps traveling internationally for the first time on official business, it can take upwards of 6 to 8 weeks to get their passport in place and any necessary visa. So in those cases, we would probably be looking at closer to 4.5 months. But we can still do things much more quickly. The fastest I've ever seen was we had a request for a virtual engagement with Argentina where they needed a US speaker on the economic costs of climate resilience and water. And we were able to line up a USGS speaker in less than 2 weeks, who actually was able to speak some Spanish with the group as well. So it was a very exciting opportunity for them. So it can be really fast. If they have the necessary travel documents already, we've even been able to get folks in country in less than a month. But 3 months is sort of our target timeline. For an example, so this is a very recent example. We actually just had a team get back from Uzbekistan a couple of weeks ago. This is sort of a way to think about the in-person 2 weeks and how you can break it down into constituent parts. So you can see at the beginning of the timeline, the folks arrive in Uzbekistan on October 24th. They start in the capital city of Tashkent. They do some embassy briefings. They spend a day on that. They spend a day on consultations in Tashkent. This is government to government. This is government to business. This is effectively any public and private sector counterparts who would be relevant to the project or relevant stakeholders. You can have them meet with them while they're in country. On the 27th and the 28th, the experts attended an international conference in Tashkent focused on children's health and the environment. They presented on their respective research areas, which were focused on groundwater quality management and regulation and enforcement of water quality. It was one individual from USGS and one individual from US EPA. They also attended a variety of other water panels and met with other participating experts to discuss areas of cooperation and potential challenges that they're facing in Uzbekistan to get a better sense of the situation on the ground. Following that, they traveled to Nukus, which is the capital of Karakalpakstan, which is the autonomous region within Uzbekistan. While they were in, I'll call it KP, they met with graduate students at the Medical Institute and delivered some lectures on water quality management and its intersection with human health, as well as meetings with the government, the autonomous government of Karakalpakstan and the regional water authorities there to learn more about what they're doing to improve water quality and water access in a very seriously water-stressed environment. The Aral Sea has evaporated and is really very limited compared to what it used to be, and this is creating salinity issues and other water quality challenges that are having adverse impacts on human health in the region. Once they sort of completed their discussions there, they returned to Tashkent for some final consultations and closeout. They also did what we call the public diplomacy portion of the program through the American Center there. They did a chai chat, as it were, which was an educational session with local secondary school students. focused on sustainable water resource management and careers in water management. So again, really kind of engaging the community, invoking sort of a broader stakeholder network of potential collaborators on water management challenges. And then lastly, they met with the embassy to discuss the observations that they made while they were in country, to begin drafting their report and receive necessary security out briefings. And so over that kind of 2-week period, you can see that they had some stuff that was within the capital, meeting with a variety of different stakeholders. Then they traveled to the autonomous region and did some kind of more work in the field and with other regional stakeholders, and then went back to the capital to wrap things up. And this is just an example of one way to structure a trip, but it's reminiscent or kind of reflective of how many of our trips are ultimately planned out. So why choose an AWEP? We provide tailored expertise, so you get 1 to 2 experts that are uniquely recruited and selected for each program from a broad variety of different water institutions. If you need expertise from the US government, we can do that, whether it's DOI or elsewhere. If you need expertise from academia, we can do that. We go to the expertise where it lives, and we try to find the best match possible for every program. We provide flexible delivery options. So if you want somebody in country, if you're in a country where the face-to-face interaction is really important, and you want to make sure that you get FaceTime between the experts and the foreign counterparts, that's great. We can do that. If virtual is easier because bandwidth at post is really limited and you just want to get a foot in the door and you want to express your interest in supporting water issues more broadly, we can do that too. And hybrid is obviously a great in-between point where perhaps you don't have a full idea of exactly what the foreign counterparts' needs are, and you'd like a couple weeks of virtual consultations to really flesh that out. And then perhaps from there, you can start looking at an in-person agenda. You can look at an in-person program that really meets the needs more effectively than it would if you're just sort of brainstorming and pulling things out of thin air. Obviously, it's still short-term. We work on as what we call responsive timelines. Target delivery 3 months, deliver in as few as 2 weeks. We really try to limit it to no more than 6 months so that we are able to kind of address the most pressing water challenges. This works great if you have an existing water program that you simply need supplemented, something that didn't get covered in the initial scoping, or if you have an urgent issue, if you have some developing crisis or urgent concern that a foreign counterpart has, we can be really responsive to that in ways that other programs cannot. And this is where I'd specifically kind of turn to why choose something else. If you need a larger team, if you need more than 1 to 2 people, and we're happy to let you know if we think that's the case, AWEP is probably not going to be a good fit. If you have a long timeline, if you expect it's going to take 3 months plus to sort of get the foreign counterpart to the table, if you expect that they're going to need more time on the ground than 1 to 2 weeks, AWEP would probably not be a good fit. We have done repeat programs in the past where we have sort of a phase 1 and a phase 2, but each phase needs to have some sort of very concrete deliverable. It can't just be, oh, well, we're going to break our 1-year program down into 4 phases and call it good. If you need something that long, there are other programs. Embassy Science Fellows is a pretty common option for those types of things where you need sort of extended access to an expert. I'm happy to talk about ways we've worked with ESF folks in the past. It's definitely a great program for what it does. It's just a different focus area. And then lastly, salary reimbursement. If your experts, like sometimes we have posts come to us with specific experts that they know that they want to work with. If those experts will require salary reimbursement, unfortunately, AWEP is not going to be a good fit. We do not have the ability to cover salary for our experts because of the foreign affairs appropriations requirements. It has to be for the benefit of our international counterparts, and so we can't pay US government salary from it. And I guess now to move to, if you do think it's a good fit for you, how do you apply? How do you reach out? How do you express an interest? So as I mentioned earlier, applications are reviewed and accepted on a rolling basis. We can expedite applications if there's some kind of time sensitivity. So please let us know if this is something that's really urgent or if there's some pressing deadline where, for example, there's an election coming up and you really need to deliver this technical assistance before an election happens. Or if there's a crisis, there's a dam just broke, and obviously some of the context we will infer if it's an emergency or not, but let us know, give us the full kind of picture of what the need is, and we will do our best to accommodate that and expedite things accordingly. On the graphic, you can see sort of the step-by-step process for an application. It starts with scoping, where the embassy will work with foreign counterparts to identify what the particular needs are and how the US might be best positioned to help. Then you will, once you have an idea, you will draft the proposal. You will draft using either the PDF version of the application or the Microsoft Form version of the application. It asks a list of questions, fairly general, things like, what is the water situation in your country? What types of expertise are you looking for? What's the target timeline? What types of public diplomacy activities would you envision would be appropriate for this program? Basic things like that. Just to give us a sense of what you're looking for, we consider those working documents, so they don't need to be 100% fleshed out perfect at the first submission. So then you would, once we sort of have a sense of what you're looking for, you would submit a final application, which we would review. You can submit the PDF version of the application to the OES, the Bureau of Oceans, Environment, and Sciences Water Team at oeswaterteam@state.gov. You can submit the Microsoft Form version at the link that'll be in the next slide. And that'll ping both myself and the State Department team, letting us know that we have an application. So it's sort of automated in that way. Once we receive an application, we will review, requesting further information as needed. Sometimes it's small details like, okay, you say you're looking for as soon as possible. What does that mean? Sometimes it's, you say you're looking for groundwater management. Are you looking more on the quantity side? Are you looking on the quality side? Are you looking at monitoring? Just getting a better sense of the particular type of expertise you might be looking for. We will revise the application slightly just to make sure that we have all of those details. And then once it's accepted, we will start the recruitment process. We will draft a recruitment notice, which the embassy or consulate will approve before it goes out for solicitation. And that's sort of the end of the recruitment phase prior to or pre-implementation. And you can see the blue line below is sort of where myself and the AWEP team would get involved. From that point forward, we will take the lead on it. In terms of how to apply, again, email the PDF application to oeswaterteam@state.gov, or the Microsoft Form version is available at the link there. If you get to the application and you have any questions or you run into any issues with it, I would encourage you to reach out to myself at egoffey@ios.doi.gov. I am happy to look over draft applications. I'm happy to jump on consultation, like a quick meeting, and talk about what ideas you might have and how they might fit into AWEP. Again, we really do consider the applications working documents, so nothing needs to be perfect. We're happy to work with you every step of the way. And with that, I will stop. I know I've given you guys a ton of information, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thanks again for listening.